Hey everybody, welcome back to Car and Driver's Video Cave. I'm Carlos Lago.
I'm Rich Ceppos.
And we're going to be talking about Rich's experience driving 4 vehicles, I believe. 4 vehicles at Lightning Lap this year. Rich, when did you start at Car and Driver?
Which time?
The first time.
Way back, before Al Gore invented the internet in 1978. I worked here till 91, then I went off and did a bunch of other things, including working in product development at GM, and came back in 2017 because I just couldn't stay away any longer.
I asked, because I remember reading some of your notes on the E30 M3 review, which I was referencing recently, but also way back when I wanted to get one. But anyway, that's a topic for another time. Let's move on to the show. We're going to start with the Subaru BRZ at VIR. So the BRZ and the GR86 are essentially identical. So we'll have an opportunity to talk about both cars, but it's kind of could be one long discussion about both here.
Yeah, they really are pretty much the same. This event is my first time at VIR, and though I've been racing for many years, driven most of the major racetracks, I have to say there's one section of VIR that really gave me a hard time, and that's the climbing S's.
I was just about to guess that's the one it was.
And it took the better part of 2 days to kind of figure it out. So here we are whipping down the straightaway. It's 127 miles an hour or whatever we hit there. And what you can't see is that this car is really a blast to drive in the sense that it slides around. It slides the tail around there. You saw a little flip of opposite lock. I had to catch the
Caught
tail.
it there nicely.
I'm just trying to keep that tail in line, but it's usually sliding somewhat. I just don't want it to slide too much.
Yeah.
Now, when we're going to come up to the climbing S's here, and the tough part was getting the line just right, figuring out where to look far enough ahead, because when you get to the turn we're coming to right now and you go back to the left,
yes,
there's a dip.
Yeah.
And that dip is much bigger than it looks on video.
You do not want to put a tire in that dip.
And it throws if you're not kind of driving straight over it, at that split second, the car wants to just throw itself to the left and hang the tail out. And at 115 miles an hour, that gets a little scary. So I didn't like it when it did that the first few times, but in this particular lap, I kept it from doing that.
Yeah, things get bad really quick at those kind of speeds.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem very fast, but really, it's how quick you actually just go through that second part of the corner where there's a dip. It's just a split second, so you really got to get it right. Otherwise, the rest of the lap is very straightforward in this car. The thing that we had to watch out for with both this car and the GR86, which are virtually identical, was the brakes.
Yes.
Now, the Subaru engineers substituted high temperature DOT for brake fluid, which allowed this car to do more than one lap. I could put together a couple of laps to practice, but unfortunately the Toyota engineers wouldn't put this fluid in the car, the high temp .4 fluid, because it wasn't stock Toyota fluid. The Subaru engineers were kind of cheating it, and the Toyota guys wouldn't. So you really could only get one lap out of the Toyota brakes. You can see here a little bit of flicking left and opposite lock, just trying to keep the tail in line, and you're going to go over that limit just a little bit. But here we had pretty good brakes all the way through the lap, and really with the Toyota too, just one lap. Here you could do more. So it was pretty straightforward once I got through those climbing S's, but 2 days it took me to figure out the climbing S's.
It seems like there's a couple parts on this track too where you want to be in between the gears you already have, or like being on the limiters a little bit faster than actually going for the shift.
And actually looking back, I probably should have tried shifting also, because sometimes I bump into the speed limiter in the twisty parts, and it's never clear until you look at the lap time whether you want to not be on the limiter or not.
You're always going to have that internal debate though, like should I have shifted a little bit early, or should I, and you never know if like you're going to lose time by doing the shift and then downshifting. It's a tough balancing act to try to figure out, but the data helps.
Well, the Subaru engineers showed me some of their data, and coming into this corner, which it was better to shift, so I started shifting, and I could carry more speed, but I probably should have tried the other ones as well.
So now let's move on to the GR86. This is going to feel like a severe case of deja vu.
It was driving it, but I was looking for, first of all, I was kind of scared because this lap, I knew I had one lap
Yeah.
and the brakes were going to go out.
The pressure's on.
And I was like, can't screw this up because I have fresh tires and one lap worth of brakes. On the street, this car handles a little bit differently than the BRZ. Our guys have found on a comparison test, it has stiffer suspension and a bigger rear anti-roll bar. And on the street, it hangs its tail out more easily. It can slide around more easily. On the track, to me, it felt virtually identical. I couldn't tell you the difference in how they drove. And yet this car, every time out, I only took it out a few times because of the brakes before this lap, it was always a few tenths of a second faster than the Subaru.
Consistently.
Consistently.
Yeah.
It was never slower. And I think the main reason was there's just car-to-car differences sometimes.
Yeah.
Some cars are just a little bit faster than others. And maybe it was the handling, but that didn't feel different. Mm-hmm. But when we looked at the sector times, there's 6 sectors around the course here. When we looked at the sector times, except for one sector, they were virtually identical.
But it did pick up about half a second, a little bit more than the BRZ.
In
overall,
sector 3, it picked up 0.6 of a second. And that was, in fact, this is about as much.
Moment.
This car went about as quick as I would have expected compared to the last BRZ we tested, which was the TS model that had Brembo front and rear brakes. It had, I believe it was Fox dampers on it, but it had high performance dampers and it had a big rear wing, but it had less horsepower. It had 23 less horsepower. So you figure a second or two difference based on the horsepower. It had the same. It was Sox dampers. Yeah. It had the same tires, so you'd have the same grip, but you wouldn't have the same handling. So this was 2.2 seconds a lap quicker than that last BRZ TS. Mm-hmm. And that was about what I would have expected. I actually spent too much time in the BRZ thinking it should be going faster.
Gotcha.
And this car did that right out of the box.
Yeah.
Now here's going to be a big slide, if I remember.
Yeah, that's a decent one.
Yeah, and that was a little more than I wanted.
Both of these cars had the optional tire, the Michelin Pilot Sport 4, but that's an 18.
That's an 18.
And the base car comes with a 17 that has, it's the Michelin Primacy, the same tire that the last gen had, and that thing's over your city.
And that's a like an all-season tire.
And all-season performance.
I mean, these are real performance tires, and they certainly help the car. But it was a little hard to compare to the BRZ TS because it has a different engine and it's a different structure. It's a stiffer structure, but it worked well. But the big deal is that you may be not going very fast relative to some of these other cars, but it is so much fun to drive because it slides around and you're going plenty fast. I mean, you come out of this corner going 90 miles an hour.
That's moving,
and it feels fast. Even though the speeds aren't there, you're sliding around more than in some of the faster cars, I think.
Yeah, these things are so much fun and so loose. I got in trouble at the reveal for sliding around too much on track. They specifically pulled me aside and said, "Please stop.
Stop smoking the tires." Now here's
fun.
where this thing almost runs off the end of the track. I ran out of brakes.
Oh, right at the end.
Right at the end, the brake pedal went to the floor, and it didn't look it there. But if I wasn't sure I was going to stay on the track, went right to the floor there.
So, note to potential BRZ and GR86 owners: get some DOT4 fluid in your brakes if you're going to a racetrack.
At a minimum, but probably upgrade the whole brake system.
Yeah. So the Volkswagen Golf GTI Autobahn edition. You're going from rear drive to front drive, manual to automatic. What's going through your mind in the differences?
Well, you just dial into what the car does. And of course, this is one lap, but I had driven it multiple laps before. And the thing about these new VWs is they handle beautifully. They've really improved the handling to the point where the balance is so good. It has really no more understeer than you would find in a decent rear drive car. And So they proved very, very stable and very easy to drive. Both this one and the Golf R, even though the Golf R is all-wheel drive, just very, very, very smooth. No jumping around on the track. No awkward moves. It was just you could get in them and go quick right away, and they were amazingly good on the track.
Yeah.
For cars that are so nice on the street, and that you wouldn't think a front-drive, front-heavy car would really be this good. But you're going to see in a second a big mistake I made. Coming up through these climbing S's up here, I tried to do this without lifting off the throttle, and you'll see when I get to the left-hander that it's probably going about 120, which was probably a few miles an hour, just a little too fast, and it starts to slide across the track, and I just barely keep it from going off the track. Now, I had to slow way down because I was then on the wrong side of the track. But this is what we try to do. Everybody who's driving a Lightning lap is experimenting, and this was my second fastest lap. Unfortunately, the first fastest, I failed to stick the SD card into the V-Box, and we never recorded it, so it's not official. So you can see why this is my second fastest, because I made that big mistake and had to slow down at the end of those climbing S's. The rest of the lap goes just fine. Again, this is a car that you can love on the street because it rides well, it steers well, the motor is great, it's quick, it's practical. It's just it's a box with windows, and yet if you wanted to, you could take it out to the racetrack. Now I don't know about doing 30 laps in a row. I never tried that.
Yeah.
But it could stand up to a few laps, and was very talkative through the steering and very easy to control. So the things we didn't like about it have to do with things like its infotainment system being hard to use. But driving it, it's a delight.
Did you have the same trouble with the GTI that you did with the Golf R about you'd accidentally graze a switch on the steering wheel while hot lapping? And
for some reason that didn't happen on this car, and I'd have to look at the two steering wheels.
I would see they're different.
I was able to keep this in sport mode and let it do its thing. I did shut off the stability control. Neither of these cars needed it.
You can do it now though, right?
And you can shut it fully off. And they are just so well behaved. Front drive cars with some power will spin the inside front tire. Not this one. It has an electronically limited slip differential in the front, and it works like a charm. Very, very seamless driving experience here. And again, that first fastest lap, which is not this, was I think another second and a half quicker. So I think this car would be about in the 3:10.5 range, which is faster than the BRZ or the GR86, which is beat a couple of sports cars.
Well, maybe we'll get it back next year, and hopefully we can see that improvement, right?
I want to do that. It's a matter of pride.
And now we upgrade to the GTI's older, more sophisticated, more powerful, and more drive wheels brother, right? The Volkswagen Golf R.
All-wheel drive car. With 315 horsepower now. This one also has the dual clutch automatic. And same tires as on the GTI, so the cornering speeds aren't going to be much different.
Similar weight too, right?
It's not much heavier.
Yeah, surprising.
But it's starting to get to some decent speed down the front straight, 137-ish miles an hour here. Good brakes, much bigger brakes than the GTI. And even though it has all-wheel drive, it behaved almost identically to the GTI.
I'm hearing the chime beeping. Is that the buttons accidentally getting hit on the steering wheel?
Unfortunately, this car has the R mode button on the steering wheel and some other buttons, and I would leave the pits in the most aggressive mode, the Nürburgring mode, which is manual shifting mode. And partway through the lap, I'd realize the car was shifting itself. The steering wheel heat had been turned on. You have to keep your hands at 9 and 3 to work the shift paddles. And in order to when you do that, sometimes your palms hit these various buttons on the steering wheel, and it really drives you crazy.
They're all touch-sensitive switches.
Touch-sensitive
so you
switches.
Just graze it, and it's on.
And you know, it was just very hard to get a clean lap. And eventually, I just put it in sport mode, which probably wasn't the fastest mode, and was able to get a clean lap without the thing switching around on me. And it might have been a little bit quicker in one of the in the more aggressive mode. Not much, I don't think, but it was really a pain in the butt to try to drive this car on a track like that. And it's otherwise a wonderful car to drive. And again, like the GTI, easy to drive. It's very friendly, very progressive at the limits. Plus, it goes faster and has good brakes. I mean, it's a real track car. But I think if you're interested in track driving with this car, get the manual transmission, because then you can put your hands at 10 and 2 and keep them off the steering wheel spokes at 9 and 3. And there you won't be hitting those buttons and shifting the modes around.
Or maybe just get a flathead screwdriver and pry those buttons off so you don't accidentally.
I don't know what you could do.
It's got to be maddening.
It was maddening, you know, to try to in the middle of the lap to figure out what was happening with the car and how to deal with it.
I think at one point, did I see the windshield wipers come on at some point of your lapping session?
It might have been another lap when I went off over here.
Oh, we won't talk about that.
When it bounced, it put the windshield wipers on.
Okay.
But I got it under control enough on this lap that nothing really untoward happened. It was a very straightforward
There
lap.
they are.
Oh, I must have hit the curb too hard then.
Well, you know, with this and the GTI, it seems like, you know, they have a pretty flat learning curve, right? The challenge, well, the Golf R specifically seems to be just accidentally grazing those buttons, which is such a needless problem to have, right?
Yeah. You really could figure out the car fast, and it was easy to drive. But yeah, it was those other things that made it hard to drive. And
otherwise, it's such a sweetheart, isn't it?
You know, for a car that does all this, it's really quite something.
Well, thank you so much for walking us through those laps. I'm sure it was a lot of fun.
It was fun. It was stressful trying to learn how to do all this stuff, how to manage my time with the various cars, because you've got to learn the track, and then you've got to learn it in four. In my case, it was more like 3 different cars.
Yeah.
And that's a big challenge because the braking points change and the car's behavior changes, and you know, to get all that at once. Normally I go to a racetrack, probably in a car I know, to a racetrack I know, and I could just repeat the laps and slowly work up on it. But Dave Beard, one of our other drivers, said to me, hey, this isn't like racing, this is like qualifying.
Yeah.
You really got to go out and go fast really, really soon. And that made it a big challenge, even for a guy with a lot of racing laps. This was a whole different thing.
All your endurance racing experience is just right out the window.
It was kind of backwards from everything I had done before. So yes, I made some mistakes and I learned, and maybe they'll let me back next year. I hope they will.
I think we're definitely going to let you back for next year. Thank you guys for watching. Tell us in the comments what you would like to see at Lightning Lap next year. Also give us a like and subscribe if you like this video, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks for coming.